Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome home to Torah. A warm welcome to Torah. We are not in the Yiboneh Beit Midrash. We are in the Eretz Chemda Beit Midrash, where we have been learning this last month and a half, whatever it's been. You know, we lose all track of time recently. I want to mention, just for those who are watching us for the first time, we're using the Yakar to explain the verses in the Parsha. Usually we only go through one or two verses, and that could take a lot of time. So who the Yakar is, go back and watch some of the other videos and you'll see who. But number one, you should know that we have Hebrew sheets. You can go onto our website. There are links below, and you can get copies of the sheets. However, they're not as colorfully decorated as mine. You'll just get plain black and white. That's number one. Number two, if you want to get the English source sheets, you can write me an email. Again, that's in the link below. Also, because we are in the middle of a war and there's a revolution, there's a tshuva revolution going on, I want to bring a verse before we begin our Parsha Toldos, and that is in Bamidbar, in Parshas Matos, where we're going to battle. We're going to battle against the Midianites. There's a verse, a very famous verse. It says, Elif Lamate, Elif Lamate. So it's chapter 31, verse 5. 1,000 from each tribe, 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 altogether. So what does that mean? There were 12,000. There were 12 tribes. You're sending 1,000 from each tribe, and then it's repeated 1,000 from each tribe. For all those people in the room who are actually making tzitzis, and I'm going to just take 1 second to show you how we're doing it. Okay, I just wanted to show you what we're doing here. This is the command center. We are making tzitzis for the soldiers. The green ones are for the regular soldiers. The white ones are for the Chayil Avir, for the Navy and the Air Force. Okay, so I wanted to show you a quick glance of what
this is for the Army.
Okay, you didn't do it yet? Okay. So this is what the room looks like. This is the command center, and they're being shipped out every day to the front lines. Here are the 7 pairs of tefillin that Baruch Hashem people have donated either money or actual tefillin. We had them checked, we had them refurbished, but basically most of these here are brand new sets, and I'll give you just an idea. And these special cases for the Chayalim. And they're on their way now to the front line. Okay, so we're back. So now you know what we're doing here. We're making tzitzis. Are we doing enough? We have to pray. We have to learn Torah. We have to maybe give charity. Whatever it is, there's a lot we can do. There are going to be, for every tribe, 1,000 that goes out. There's going to be 1,000 that stay behind and pray and do mitzvahs and learn Torah and make tzitzis and pack parachutes, whatever it is. We are tied to them. They are tied to us. There was an interesting story that developed this week. Somebody had a near-death experience, and he explained that when he went up to heaven, totally not religious guy, said, you know what pulled him back to earth and made him alive again? Somebody was learning Torah. This is a non-religious guy, had a near-death experience, and he's convinced that Torah learning is what's keeping him alive, and it's just an amazing story. Maybe if I can find it, I'll put the link in the description box as well, so you can hear about his story. So are we doing enough? We can imagine, try to imagine, being out there, no showers, not comfortable, who knows where you're going to sleep, and you're getting shot at, and you are trying to save the Jewish people. Okay, so we want our hostages back. That is number one. Number two, we will destroy the enemy. But that's not for me. That's for the generals to speak about. In the meantime, we have to have a lot of emunah and hope. Okay, so let's start in chapter 25 of Genesis. By the way, there are sheets here if you want, English and Hebrew source sheets for those who just came in. I want you to look at the English source sheets for a second, and I want you to compare source 1 with source 2. Source 1, Genesis 25:19, it says in bold that Isaac, the son of Abraham begot Isaac. So in Hebrew, Ela Toldos, these are generations. Yitzhak ben Abraham. Now it's established that Yitzhak is the son of Abraham. Do we really need the next 4 words? Abraham was Holid at Yitzchak. Do we really need to know that? Well, I'll tell you, we'll see Rashi. There's a lot of good reason for that. However, go to Genesis 25:12 in source 2. It's just a few verses back. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, the son of Abraham. So in Hebrew, Ben Abraham, just like Yitzhak is Ben Abraham, whom Hagar the Egyptian, now you wouldn't notice this in the English, we're going to see the Hebrew a second, the maidservant of Sarah bore to Abraham. So in the Hebrew it says that, yes, Yishmael is Ben Abraham, just like Yitzhak, but when it comes to the one who begot, or begets, caused to give birth, right? It was Yalada Hagar HaMitzrit. It was Hagar who gave birth to Yishmael. But in our verse, it's Abraham who gave birth. Obviously, we're not talking about physical birth. We are talking about who the real father is, no problem. But Holid, the word giving birth, is based on and hanging on Hagar, not on Abraham. And all throughout the Bible, you always hear the word Holid is usually applied to the male. But here we're being taught something unique about Yishmael, and his birthing is somehow dependent on an Egyptian woman named Hagar. Now, if we don't go on, you guys won't sleep tonight, because this should really bother you. Like, this is a one-off. You don't see this anywhere else, but you see it here. So let's look at the Yakar and see how he unfolds the mystery. So on the first page in the Hebrew, Ela Toldos Yitzhak ben Avraham. These are the generations of Yitzhak, who is ben Avraham. Now, Afa Pisha Amar Shahaya Yitzhak ben Avraham, even though the verse is telling me that Yitzhak was the son of Avraham, Mikol Makom Hutrak Lamar, nevertheless the Torah deems it necessary, finds it necessary to teach me that Avraham was Holid. That word Holid is causing to give birth to Yitzchak. Why is this? Hooray! Shehizker Lashon Ben Etzel Avraham, Avo HaTolada Tola Bahagar. When we see the verse referring to Yishmael, it's clearly different than Yitzchak. When it comes to the Ben, yes, he's the son of Avraham. But in terms of giving birth, begetting, it's not attributed to Avraham, but rather to Hagar. Hutzrach Lomar Khan, you need to say here the following. Shetoar, Toar means the description of the word Bain and the word Tolada, what they represent. Hakol mityaches achar Avraham. When it comes to Yitzhak, both descriptions, attributes, whether he's the son and Avraham caused the birth of Yitzhak, both aspects are on Avraham. Ki b'lashon ivri. Now this sage lived over 400 years ago, and he was an expert in Hebrew, better than all of us put together in this room. And he tells us that within the Hebrew, we'll call it Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, yesh chiluk bein Lashon ben ubein Lashon tolada. So there's a difference. We have to become cognizant of these differences. So ben means son of, tolada means begetting. And what's the difference? First, he says there are ki Lashon bein ye'amer lefamim af below tolada. This is an amazing concept. Are you aware of the fact that this expression, son of, is actually said many times without the person giving birth? I'll ask you, when is that? People adopt people, right? There are such a thing as an adoption. I get that. But what about the famous phrase about students? Students are your children. Okay? So that's what the Yakar brings down, a famous statement. Ki talmidim kroyim banim, af al pi shelo yolada mamish. That when you are a mentor to somebody, when you are, if you're dealing with conversions or balei tshuva, people, you're mentoring them, you're giving them so much wisdom and direction, it's like you're an adopted, a spiritual parent. So that's the truth about rabbis and people who are into teaching. Their students are called children. They're children, meaning they're product, even though they never gave birth to them in actuality. And the Yakar brings down 3 examples. The example dealing with Batia and Moshe, right, we have a Batia here. Batia relationship with Moshe was she was like an adopted mother. We have Mordechai and Esther. Okay, we're not going to get into the aspect of the relationship, but the Torah itself describes him as like an adopted father. And Avraham himself, he's called Av Hamon Am. Av Hamon Goyim. He is the father of a multitude of nations, and yet he did not give birth to every one of them. So let's just look at the verses themselves. You can see this in 3, 4, and 5 in the source sheet. Right? Exodus 2:10. This is regarding Basia. It says Vihila Laven, right? He became like her son. Obviously, she did not give birth. In Esther, there are 2 verses. One is in Esther 2:7. It says Mordechai took her to himself for a daughter. L'kochacha Mordechai lo labat. And in Esther chapter 2, verse 15, who had taken her for a daughter. Asher lokach lo labat. So you have the relationship of father-son or father-daughter or mother-son, in this case, as a parent. And in Genesis 17:5, where Abraham is no longer called Avram, but rather Avraham, as the verse says, he's now Avraham because he's a father of a multitude of nations, Av Hamon Goyim, as we quoted. Okay, so you can see that there is a difference between, so far we're beginning to describe the difference between the word ben and then the word toladah. Now, I think what he does now, he tries to prove his point by a narrative, a story that Moses has with God. It says in Numbers chapter 11, verse 12, you'll see that number 6 on the source sheet, where God is kind of upset with the Jewish people, and Moses feels somewhat responsible, as any leader would. He was the major influence. We call him Moshe Rabbeinu. He is our teacher. Okay? So he says to God, Hanochi hariti et kol ha'am hazeh, im anochi yaliditihu. He's asking God, did I conceive these people? Did I give birth to them? Right? Am I carrying? You say to me that I should carry them in my bosom? Listen, God, I'm just going to try to say what the Yakar is saying, then we'll see inside. Don't blame me. I did the best I can to influence them. It didn't catch. But I didn't give birth. So their bad behavior is not because of me, meaning be'etzem, through the DNA part. And this is how the Yakar expresses it. Yomar. Second line down in the second paragraph. Afapi shehem talmidai. Even though, yes, they are my students. The talmidim kroim banim. And we know the famous phrase that students are called children. Mikol makom harei lo yaliditim mamish. But God, I didn't actually give birth to them. Uma eseh, what can I do? Ima sehem mishtanim mitova lara. If they're acting improperly, what can I do? What did I do? If their actions change from good to bad, ki ha'arimu eitza v'lo mini. Whatever bad schemes they came up with, it wasn't from me. Lo mimeni yotza davar. It wasn't from me that this consequence, these outcomes came from. So im came, lama zeh tatil kol haTorah hazeh elai ki ilu ashmatem tloi bi. So this is what Moses is saying. So if that's the case, why are you placing on me all these troubles? Why are you putting on me as if I'm the one who's guilty, that everything's on my shoulders? Okay, now, that was like a nice statement. These next 2 lines I'm a little bit confused about, because I'm trying to say, I think what the Yakar is doing here is that if you have, at this point, a good question, I already have a good answer to your question. You and I would probably not have asked this question. But in Bamidbar chapter 3, verse 1, it says, these are the descendants of Moses and Aaron. Okay, now this is referring to as as Rashi explains, if you see the verses, it's talking about Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu are Aaron's children. They're not Moses' children. And yet the verse uses Toladot. Ela Toldos, Aaron and Moshe. So if they're not Moses' children, they're only his students, why does the Torah use the word Toladot? And the answer the Yakar gives, because Aaron's in the verse, and they really are Aaron's children. And look at the Rashi. It's a very interesting Rashi. These are the descendants of Moses and Aaron, yet we see only the sons of Aaron are mentioned. Remember, we're looking at the word Toledot, and it mentions Moshe. However, they are considered Moses' descendants because he taught them Torah. This teaches us that whoever teaches Torah to the son of his fellow man, Scripture regards it as if he begotten him. I think that the Yakar is just trying to answer, if you had such a question, why Toledos is used there. It's because of Aaron is in the verse, but we still have the lesson learned about someone who has an influence. Okay, Lefikach. Here we come to Yishmael. Once again, Yishmael lo nikra ki'im ben Avraham. Going back to the first verse, we have ben Avraham and Holy Yitzchak. That was by Yitzchak. But by Yishmael, it's only ben Avraham. Kilo kibel tivo zulat ma shalimdo Avram mima'asav tovim. The only thing that Yishmael received from naturally was whatever Avram taught him. In other words, it doesn't mean that it stuck, but that's it. It wasn't be'etzem. It was only whatever influence could have been from Avram's side. He made every attempt to treat and to influence his son Yishmael correctly. But it was only superficial. It was happenstance. It could be changed very easily, and we see that it did, because Hares Lasof, towards later on, we see Yotza Latarbus Ra, that Yishmael himself was corrupted. I want to bring your attention. Where are we at? I don't want to go out of order. Let's continue, and then I'll get to these sources. Lefikach tola hatolada b'Hagar. And now we understand why in that verse 12 that the tolada was not somehow dependent on Abraham, but it was dependent on Hagar. Now this sounds a little bit risque here. It says, Kikibel Teva Hagar. Just trying to get, I think I lost the line here. Kikibel Teva Hagar HaMitzrit VaHaMitzrim Shetufe Zima. How do I translate this? That Yishmael received this certain nature from this Egyptian woman, and it's well known that the Egyptians were Shetufe Zima. Shetufe Zima, I'm going to translate as they acted sexually inappropriately. They were deviant. Okay? Al Kain, therefore, Hayagamhu Mitzachek Begilu Erayas. That's where I want to bring in the other sources. Also, therefore, Yishmael was Mitzachek. We're going to deal with that word in Gili Erayas, which means sexually inappropriate. Okay? Now, Promiscuous, thank you. So the word mitzachek, I want to take you on a little journey. And I want to take you to number 10. It says Exodus 32:6. This is the day after. On the next day, they arose early, offered up burnt offerings, brought peace offerings. The people sat down to eat and drink. This is the sin of the golden calf. Are you aware, at the sin of the golden calf, there were 3 sins? The 3 major sins. We know, it's obvious that there was idol worship. That's what the golden calf is all about, idol worship, correct? But there was also murder. Chor was murdered. And what about sexual immorality? Well, if you saw the movie, you knew there were belly dancers. So there must have been, it all starts there. Anyway, so in the Hebrew, it says they got up and to make merry. The Hebrew is, you can see that on the top, page 3, the akuma litzachek. And Rashi says there, to make merry, litzachek, and this word, it's also a connotation of sexual immorality. Okay, and we have a verse in Genesis 39:17, which I'll take you in a second to see, and also regarding bloodshed. Okay, in 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 14. So I'll take you quickly to number 11. Number 11 is, anybody hear of the Radap? You never heard of the Radap? Okay. The Radap is Rav Aaron Dovid Poston. Keep that in your memory. You have to have a sense of humor. So I wrote, obviously regarding the golden calf, the sin of the idol worship was committed, along with murder and sexual immorality. So in Genesis 39:17, what's that verse referring to? Mrs. Potiphar was lying about Yosef Atzadik's sexual advancements. And the word litzachek, as Rashi mentioned, is used. And in 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 14, there was almost like a civil war, but basically Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was going to be king, and King David was going to be king, and their people battled it out. You see in verse 16, each one took hold of his fellow's head, and his sword was thrust to his fellow's side. They fell together, and we see the word. We saw the word v'yisachehu. Okay, so that word implies that Yishmael was already involved in sexual immorality, murder, and idol worship. Of course, we did discuss for the last few weeks that Yishmael will do tshuva. I don't know about all of Yishmael. A certain portion. We saw the Abraham Accords. We do believe that many, hopefully, right now is a very pivotal point for every person in the Arab world to choose a side. Are you going to be part of the family of Yishmael that does tshuva, or are you going to remain as is, which would be sad for everybody in the world included. Let's continue. So the Yakar continues after the word. We're only on the top line. That Yishmael was mitzachek, the Giloy Arayis, was sexual immorality. V'lo nishtana, that did not change. Kikibel teva be'etzem, because that was within his DNA. Al kein tola hamikra bi'Avram. That's why the superficial, the mikra was dependent on Avram, but the etzem, the essence of who he was dependent on Hagar. Now that's true by Yishmael. What about Yitzhak? Aval Yitzhak kibel teva Avram, and he was lamed gam b'masa, so he received. That's why both words are used in our parsha, in our first verse. He was ben and he was tolada, because he received the nature, that's first nature from Avram, and second nature, all of his actions he learned. Al kein tola kol ba'Avram. That's why everything is dependent on Avram, both language of Bain and language of Tolada. What about Yishmael again? Al Kain Lo King Yishmael, but that's not true by Yishmael. Shahai Mitzachek Begila Arayas, Gam Bioto Naar. Even when he was young, why do you think Sarah wanted him out of the house? So I want to take you, I said I was taking you on a little journey. Go to number 9. It said, but the matter greatly displeased Abraham concerning his son. And then God said, don't be displeased concerning the lad, because Sarah told them to leave. But if we understand in the Hebrew, in Genesis chapter 21, verses 11 and 12, the thing pained Abraham greatly, Beinei Abraham. Rashi says, because he heard that he had fallen into wicked ways. This is why Abraham was upset. Obviously, pshat is he was upset because Sarah said to get rid of him. But the way we understand it here is that he was actually upset because he saw his son going in a bad direction. So let's continue. Kikach karu hakatuv ba'otozman. That's what we just read. That verse, chapter 21, verse 11 and 12. V'higi lanu hakatuv b'yitzak. So our chapter, right, chapter 25, verse 19, is talking about Yitzchak. Sheki bel teva aviv mikol v'kol. He received everything he could possibly receive from Avraham. By the way, I mentioned this before. According to Islamic tradition, it was not Yitzchak who was on the Akedah, but it was Yishmael. because, the verse says, your son, your only son, the one you love, and they really feel, I gave a whole shiur on that, displaced. This is part of their problem. Learn how to deal with it without killing people. Okay, but here we have, what about this man Yitzhak? What a tzaddik. Hayagadur me'arayos kolkach. Yitzhak received everything from Avraham, who was a moralist. He was a ethicist. He was monotheistic, ethical perfection, right? Ad shekavash mayano. Those 3 words. He was well disciplined. It means that he conquered his fountain, his wellspring. Meaning he didn't get married until 40. Right? How can a guy like that be, right? He was handsome, wealthy, prominent. He was probably, really good looking. He looked like Avraham, we'll see shortly. Who wouldn't want to marry him? He was probably the bachelor of the millennium, right? We're talking about Yitzhak. Lo noso isha ad hayoto ben arbaim shana. He didn't get married until he was 40. Obviously, he had such self-control. Ki himtin ad shiyamatze es Rivka bazugo. And he actually waited until he found Rivka, his soulmate, his partner. V'loroto lehitchatein ima knanim. Keep in mind, we spoke about this earlier also. He did not want to marry the Canaanites. Now, why? Remember, we're saying that he was moral. Who are the Canaanites? They come from Africa, okay? So they came over and they stole the land, okay, whatever. They were here before us to a certain extent. They were here at the time of Abraham. As soon as we come out of Egypt, we're told to get rid of them, send them back to Africa, send them back to where they came from. What was the sin of Ham? It was a sexual nature. There's a machlokus whether he sodomized his father Noach or whether he castrated him, but we'll go for the time being of sodomized. Shiroshu hazima mincham avihem shirba'u lenoach avi. So why did Yitzhak not want to marry a Canaanite? Because the Canaanites come from Ham, and Ham had a sexual encounter with Noach, which was inappropriate. And that's why he waited 40 years for Rivka. Ki beli safek, there's no doubt. Ben yachid kamoto hayulo koftzim rabim. I wasn't making it up. A guy like this, a single guy like this, many would jump on him. Ve'ech yoshi below isha's man rav kazeh, and how can a handsome chatich like this remain unmarried for so long? Elavadai minatam shizkarnu. It must be for the reason we said above, that he was well disciplined. Now the next paragraph, you have to understand, this is fake news. There's a lot of fake news that goes around. So what the Yakar is going to do is saying, there are people with fake news and they spread this propaganda. So I want to tell you what the answer is going to be. But you shouldn't think like this. And Hashem set it up, but there's always free choice. The answer is obvious, but there will be people that fall into this category. So he says, in order that people who want to make a claim and argue will not find a proper argument, but this is what they say. Im Yitzhak nolad kokach b'kedusha v'tahara. You know what? This guy Yitzhak, you're telling me he was so perfect and holy? If he was so perfect and holy, lama yotzmi menu Esau. How did you get a person who is inferior in character like Esau coming out of such a righteous person? Shayetzad nashim tachas balehem. He took women who were about to go to the chuppah with their husbands, who were, we'll see, they were virgins, and he violated them, but he was basically an adulterer. Vadai me'avi melech ne'at nit'abra Sarah. You know what they were spreading false news about? That it must be that Sarah was cohabitated with Avimelech. And so remember, the question was, where did Esau come from? He didn't come from Abraham. Our Torah tells you no, he did come from Abraham. But what would be the fake news? So how does such a righteous person like Yitzhak give birth to an Esau? It must be that Yaakov came from Sarah's side, but Esau comes from Avimelech's side. We're talking about the grandparents. So no confusion here, right? You follow? You follow? That if the people are going to ask, how did such a righteous person such as Yitzhak give birth to a good guy and a bad guy? It must be that his seed came from Avimelech, not Avraham, and therefore you have a Yaakov takes after his grandmother Sarah, and Esau takes after his grandfather Avimelech. Mitam zeh Amru Chazal. We have in Bab Metzia. It says Shaya Tsar Kalaster Panav Domi Avram. Hashem created a miracle. Now the truth is, most people do look like their parents, more like the mother, more like the father. But Yitzhak had an identical face as Abraham. Hashem created a miracle. Hine, you got it? Lefi Darkenu. This was Kedei Lahasir Hirzeh. That's in order to get rid of any idea that Avram, that Yitzhak could have been a result of a one-night stand with Avimelech. Clear as day. And then the Yakar is introducing another idea. It says, Bikachto et Rivka bas Besuel Arami, mipadan Aram, achot Lavan Arami. There is a statement in Gemara Baba Batra, page 110a, that says that Rov Banim Acher Achea Ein. That when you want to go for a shidduch, check out your future brother-in-laws. It doesn't actually work by the female, meaning you can check them out, of course, your future husband's sisters or brothers. But for a male who's looking for a wife, check out your future wife's brothers. Okay? And that's a statement. Al ken kibel echad min abanim teva shel Lavan tzayad arami. But the truth is like this. Why does the Torah go out of its way to give us this verse in Genesis 25:20, which we will look at right now? It's number 12. That yes, Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Betuel, the Aramean, of Padan Aram, the sister of Lavan. We're finding out that was her brother. Rivka's brother was Lavan. He was a shlamazel. He was a deceiver. He was not a good guy. And so that's where Esau. This is what the Torah is telling us. Esau came as a result, not through Sarah being violated by Abimelech, but by Rivka's brother in the DNA into Esau. Now, Ulafum Rahata Nira, at quick glance, we see Shalakach Hiskir Shalashtan. In that last verse, I highlighted the word Aram or Aramean 3 times. Notice, you see it? Betuel, the Aramean, from a place called Padan Aram, sister of Lavan, the Aramean, and so there are 3 times it mentions Aram. Now, why is that? He says, "L'taretz amasha metzinu shlosha midas pechuto shayu be'esav." There were 3 very inferior qualities within Esau, and the word Aram, the word is the Ramai. A Ramai is a deceiver, but nevertheless, the lesson here is that within Esau there were these 3 very inferior character traits. And the Yakar says, Ma'ayin Mekorim. What are their sources? What are they? Kimasha Yatzad Nashim Tachas Baleim. He violated women. And as the verse says, obviously he was Yaresh min Betuel Avi Imo. Right? Rivka's father is Betuel. What does Betuel sound like? The word virgin. He was Boel Kol Betulos Techila. He went and he violated the women on their way to the chuppah, like we saw in the Roman times, many, and maybe even the Cossacks. Throughout Jewish history, we've seen our enemies do these kind of acts, and it's brought down in the Yokut, and it's brought down in the Chizkuni, in the Medrash. That's the one character trait that Esau has. Is also a bad track record when it comes to sexual morality or immorality. The other thing is called gluttony. Gluttony, what did Esau say when he wanted the porridge? And we see this in number 13. It's Genesis 25:30. He uses the word, pour into me. Halitani, no. He mamish was willing to just swallow the food. That's what the Arameans, these people in this place, they were gluttonous. Midazu Yerushalayim mitzadayota mishpachat imo min padan Aram. This bad character trait came from his mother's side, from Rivka's side, because she was from Padan Aram, as brought down in the Medrash. B'shashaya Avraham Mahalek Ba'aram Narayim Ubaram Nachor. And this is in the Medrash. When Avraham was still, traveling on his way to Eretz Yisrael, and he stopped by these places, and he saw their gluttonous behavior, he saw them eating in such a gluttonous way. You know what he says? And I hope every Jew says this wherever they are in the world. Al yihi chelki be'eretz hazot. I don't want any portion in this land. Okay, look, there's a lot of good people out there in other parts of the world, all over the world. Part of the exile is that we will bring back some of the sparks, whether they're converts or whether they're good character traits. There are good things, right? There are good things in other countries, not just the culinary, not just the food, but there are good traits, and hopefully we'll bring them back. But for the major part, this is the place to be, and I think the world is seeing how we love life and treat the world. We are teaching the world a lesson. I mean, whether we're trying to or not, it's being unfolded. So what do we have so far? We have sexual immorality with Esau. We have gluttony with Esau. And the last thing is being a Ramai. The word Aramean, it's based on Ramai. Uma Shahai Esau Ramai, he was a deceiver. What do you think they have? His name is Lavan. Remember the Dukes of Hazzard? There was like the sheriff, I think, or the mayor. Like he's dressed all in white. And he was the biggest corrupted guy ever, right? You get the idea. So, Hamar es Aviv. You know what Esau did? He asked his father, how do I tithe salt? How do I tithe hay? These are things that don't need tithing. But he made himself look like he's a big tzaddik. He's so righteous that he would be willing to even, obviously he knew. That's why he said it. So anyway, Yoresh min Lavan Arami. The last thing is Shahayad Nevel V'Ramai Kenoda, that Lavan was such a corrupt and disgustable. Did I just make up a word? A disgusting person. So here you have it. These are the three traits. We will end now. There's so much. I encourage you guys, go through the Yakar on your own. This is just a beautiful explanation. You can really improve your Hebrew. I hope everyone has through this class. And I wish everybody a safe, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, to be safe. And I didn't mention in the beginning, I'll mention it now, that in the description box below, one could donate to our tefillin fund, which we just brought 7 pairs of tefillin to the front line today. And we have a lot of talasim that were donated, talis gadols. And of course, we're making talis katan for the soldiers to protect them from any harm. So B'ezrat Hashem, I think there's a revolution going on. People are waking up and at least questioning their own morality, their own mortality, and what life is really about. So B'ezrat Hashem, from strength to strength, let's continue to pray for our soldiers, and let's consider doing more, working on our character, working on our Torah, working on our prayer, and so forth. So with that, I wish everybody Shabbat Shalom. Kol Tov.
It's